Sweden did not fight the world wars. It declared neutrality. It hasn't fought a war in 200 years. But is Sweden going to war now?
Is this continent sleepwalking into conflict? Military drills surged 500% in Sweden as war fears gripped Europe. Could this be just a precaution or a chilling sign of what's to come? Europe is a hive of everyday activity, with cafes opening and closing, kids playing and visitors taking pictures. However, a shadow caused by the thunderous roar of tanks on Europe's eastern frontier looms large on the horizon. Even when top EU Ambassador Josep Borrell has warned of a possible conflict breaking out on European territory, things continue as usual. The discrepancies between government statements and public opinion indicate how differently people around the continent see the current threat. Still, it is unclear if a European conflict is actually possible, or if it is only a ploy to gain sympathy for Ukraine. Maybe it's both. The warnings may have two purposes. They might discourage Russia and advocate for more funding for Ukraine at the same time. But recent events, like the use of sophisticated Russian weapons and the prospect of a fresh onslaught this summer, raise serious doubts about the likelihood of hostilities. A possible hybrid war conducted on European soil might easily adopt the strategies used by both Russian and Ukrainian forces in this current fight. With their characteristic motorcycle-like engine noise, Iranian Shad 136 drones have been a regular sight in the Ukrainian sky during Russian offensives. In not too distant a future, it is not impossible to picture these drones buzzing menacingly over European airspace. The potential reach of these drones is highlighted by their geographic proximity, less than 2,000 miles to battlegrounds in Ukraine, such as Sevastopol and Kyiv, as well as key European cities like Berlin and Warsaw. However, these drones are not the most advanced technology available to Russia. Worrisome events have occurred recently, such as the deployment of powerful Russian weaponry across the Polish and Swedish borders. Even with these developments, there appears to be a general lack of urgency in realizing how bad the situation is. However, there are differences in this perspective throughout Europe. The public was stunned last week when the highest levels of Sweden's government and armed services made it clear that war may come to their country and that everyone should get ready. Some have blamed the nation's authorities for stimulating panic, while others have taken the warning seriously and rushed to the stores to stock up on emergency supplies and gasoline. While the country's leaders had previously issued warnings about the threats posed by its neighbor Russia's escalating aggression, this was the first time they had specifically mentioned that Sweden may end up becoming a target and a war zone. Would joining NATO be a wise decision for Sweden, considering the current tensions with Russia? Two recent events led to the alarm of Swedish military officials: the country's anticipated admission into NATO and the escalation of Russian President Vladimir Putin's threats against NATO members. Only a few months after Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, Finland and Sweden submitted applications to join NATO in May 2022. For both nations, the action marked a departure from their long tradition of neutrality. At the time, Russia's invasion of Europe posed a threat to the security order, and Sweden's need for guaranteed security through NATO membership became evident, according to then Prime Minister Magdalena Andersson of Sweden. NATO has never had a good relationship with Russia, but things became worse when the organization started thinking about admitting Ukraine. Following Finland's admission to NATO, Russia issued a warning, saying that should tensions between the two countries increase, Finland would be the first to suffer. In addition to contributing tanks, Sweden has been supporting Ukraine in its struggle against Russia's incursion. There have also been warnings from other NATO members about a possible Russian strike against their countries. While Germany's military minister suggested that Russia may attack NATO nations in 5 to 8 years, Poland's National Security Agency predicted that Russia might attack in less than 3 years. Although there is a definite Russian danger to Sweden, according to Andersson, the current head of the Swedish Social Democratic Party, the defense official's message was ineffectual and divisive. A great many folks are quite concerned. Thus, it's critical that the government monitor the ongoing contact, as the speaker stated. The government has a lot of responsibility here. In an opinion piece published in the Swedish daily Dagens Nyheter, writer and pundit Göran Greider stated that he thought the warnings revealed a secret longing to finally test the Swedish fighting forces, and that the true message was simply to give us more money. To satisfy NATO requirements for defense spending, which are 2% of a nation's GDP, Sweden has been raising its defense budget. In comparison to its 2020 budget, Sweden has roughly doubled its defense spending in its projected 2024 budget. Additionally, in December 2023, Sweden and the United States inked a deal outlining the parameters for American military operations in Sweden. The online bomb shelter map of the Swedish Civil Disasters Agency, MSB, had 3,500% more views after the warnings were published, while the number of people downloading the brochure "If Crisis or War Comes" increased by 900%. 20 years ago, Anna Lindh, the former foreign minister of Sweden, argued for more EU security policy autonomy. However, Sweden has been against major moves in the direction of increased European military might in recent years. Sweden was one of many nations that voiced opposition to plans for an EU fast reaction force last year. Is this going to change? Short term, most likely not. The main topic of discussion in Sweden's public discourse right now is bundling up and becoming closer to the US and NATO. Sweden's Prime Minister, Magdalena Andersson, emphasized early in January that her country will strengthen its ties to the alliance. The requests made by Russia for NATO to modify its open-door policy and curtail its exercises have been fiercely denied by the Swedish government. However, as time goes on, the Swedish stance may not be as firm as it initially appears. The Swedes, like many other EU members, question if the US will continue to support European security once the Biden administration ends. France is becoming more interested in the Baltic area concurrently. The nation has undertaken several drills and raised its military presence in the Baltic republics in recent years. Sweden has joined the European Intervention Initiative, EI2, which was started by France. Additionally, a letter of intent on defense cooperation was recently signed by Sweden and France. Sweden could eventually alter its stance on EU defense, though, if US democracy continues to be unstable and candidates in the Trump mold continue to garner support. However, as part of a deal with the center-right, it is improbable but not impossible that the populist Sweden Democrats will start to demand membership in NATO. If this were to occur, there would be an instant legislative majority in favor of joining the alliance. In any event, in the upcoming years, Sweden will probably step up its efforts to support its military might. A lot will depend on how the crisis between Russia and Ukraine continues to alter Swedes' perceptions of security. Beyond the daily news cycle, what are the long-term consequences of war in Ukraine for all of Europe? That's all, guys. What do you think about Sweden's defense? Will Europe overcome the threat? Do let us know in the comments and subscribe to our channel for more information.